Hi, Molly and Christy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Will y'all be sharing your screen for your presentations, or do you want us to share them from here?
I can share them.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I can share too. That's fine.
Okay, perfect. You should be able to do that if you want to test.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great. Okay, cool. Only one we'll need to pull up is actually.
I think there's an echo on your end.
Oh yeah, you can't even see me. Sorry, I'm standing up here. And then we are over here. Did this get moved?
Hi, everybody.
That's so
Jenny,
weird.
your co-panelist.
Oh.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to use. Usually you have points you can see the presenting state. So when it's, are you going first, you know, or did you?
I'm on the list first, but we haven't really talked about it. I will need the clicker, yeah. And you know, I've never used a clicker, so what do I do?
I don't know if it's on. I'll do this real quick. So since you're first, start with you. Right. And so. Perfect. So that should work. I didn't know if this is on. In that case, you can use, can I actually have you say it? Okay. Can you check if it's not, if this isn't, in that way, you can click also on the keyboard right here. I can do that. Yeah. Right. I'll move this.
So I'm going to stand here, is that right?
Yes, and you can use the navigation tools on that way.
Oh, okay, just like enter, basically.
Just these ones right here, back and forward.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And then when you'll just press stop share at the bottom there when you're done, because then they'll jump in and share.
Using this.
Yes. Or this is also touchscreen if that is better to use.
But you're going to be right there, right?
Yeah.
I never did. Really.
Don't want to make anyone. There you go.
And here's somebody's phone. Yeah, you found. No doubt.
How are you?
I'll just look at these right here. Hmm? Yes, I'm just gonna use the keyboard.
Oh, okay.
Keyboard. Okay. Maybe the battery's out or something. The microphone is on, right? And it's not.
Okay, so. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's on, okay. Make sure.
Yeah.
Alrighty, and then we're trying to do,
1, 2.
I'm gonna just stop sharing just for a second. This will be easier to do something without the sharing. Okay. Which room are we in? We're in scenario 2. Okay, so it's audio 1. And the video is choose. All right. Hold on for just a second. Testing, testing. You guys hear me okay?
Yes,
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Anne.
sure.
All right, you should be good to go. If you have any issues, though, let us know.
1, 2.
iPhone number.
So,
It's not gonna come through the speakers in here.
oh, so,
That's the thing.
so I've got to project my voice in
No,
here.
you gotta project.
Oh, okay.
That is only for the virtual people to hear you.
Okay,
So if you have any other co-presenters, make sure you pass it to them. If you, but
but we don't, they're both on
they're
there.
all here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just so I can hear you online.
Okay,
Yep. I'm gonna get your PowerPoint back up. Sorry about that.
it's all right.
Yep. You are
Jenny.
that one.
I don't know why there's two.
Oh, because it's just you made it full screen. This is the right one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got you going. All right, just 1 second. Share, and then I'm gonna do this in just a second, and then do from beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And why? That was your from beginning. 1 second. There we go. All right, and can all the virtual people still see the PowerPoint?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yes.
How am I projecting my voice? Can you hear me over back in the far corner there? All right. All right, good. I'm Jenny Wakefield, and we have two other presenters who are on this, going to be presenting from the screen, Molly Ryan and Christy Crawley. So I'm shooting for about 20 minutes on mine, and if we all kind of stick to that, we should have maybe 5 minutes at the end for questions. Does that sound okay? Molly and Christy? Okay. All right, I'll dive in. It seems like it's been about a month and a half since I stood at a podium in front of people, so I feel nervous about my PowerPoint. But anyway, I have a little epigraph here. This is a quotation from Robert Yagelski, Writing as Praxis. Writing can become a vehicle for genuine change only if we understand it as something more than a process of textual production or a means of communication, or even a form of thinking that can support learning, all of which are valid and common ways of understanding writing that are nonetheless limited and limiting. So I'll be working from there. From 2002 to 2005, I was the writing instructor for a collaborative experimental course at Clemson called Writing Architecture. And in this course, writing was embedded in the 3rd and 4th year undergraduate studios. I teamed up with each studio professor, was present during studio time, and contributed to project critiques or crits. For a number of reasons, the course was laid down after 3 years. One reason was that our efforts to articulate the role of writing and of the writing instructor in the design process was problematic. This image here is not from that, that course, but that building wasn't built yet, but you get the general idea of a crit. As a general education requirement for an advanced writing course, the course's bottom line was rhetorical. The built environment communicates meaning through shape, orientation to nature, size and mass, openness or closedness, materiality, associations to other things, and so on. We can read buildings as text. But the professors were not satisfied. Our approach had not addressed why I was there on their turf or how I was to collaborate with them. Questions that reflect our lack of clarity were, should the writing focus on analysis, helping students communicate why they made the choices they did in their design, so writing to learn, as well as to communicate? Should it use client-based projects, which could also be accomplished in a conventional technical writing curriculum? Should it instill a critical perspective by reading designs as text? Should it aid conceptualization using free writing and brainstorming? Or should it use creative writing to imagine spaces as settings for stories? Well, we tried it all, and still one 4th year professor flatly refused to work with me. But we had a WAC course on the books and needed to experiment and do our best. The creative writing idea that was suggested by one of the architecture professors was a step towards understanding audience orientation in design, because a built space is an embodied experience for its inhabitants. We could have had students write a play or a story set in the space, then enact it, potentially also moving them towards awareness of architecture as an agent of change. But a student cannot pull such imagined experience out of thin air. So as an unconventional approach, it would have been a purely cognitive exercise. At the onset of the course, though, as I sat in crits, I noticed professors using a vocabulary that I knew from my undergraduate degree in dance, more than from my MA in English. It was a vocabulary of the body in which buildings have skin, bones, skeleton, shape, balance, facades with directional orientation, mass and weight, verticality and width, space, a footprint, public and private aspects, just like bodies. This vocabulary seemed more fundamental to their discipline than the idea of buildings as texts that make an argument. Buildings can be read as texts that make an argument, but text is not all they are. Like people, buildings have and are bodies. Like people, their body language can be read. And I'll say more about body language a little bit later. But an observer's reading is at least partly projection and unrelated to the maker's internal experience of being or making. It's true that an evaluation of student designs was necessarily mediated by words, but the choice of words was cross-disciplinary. It was embodied, the built world as something we experience. The language of body was metaphorical, but we would not have understood the metaphor without our bodies, the referent of the metaphor. A rhetorical perspective, especially early in the student's design process, seemed prematurely cerebral and removed from an awareness of architectural atmosphere. As linguists George Lakoff and Robert Johnson show in their 1979 book, Metaphors We Live By, I quote, "Thought processes are largely metaphorical, possible precisely because there are metaphors in a person's conceptual system. For instance, orientational metaphors have to do with our kinesthetic spatial orientation. Up, down, in, out, front, back, on, off, deep, shallow, central, peripheral. These spatial orientations arise from the fact that we have bodies. Orientational metaphors give a concept a spatial orientation. For example, happy is up." So, end quote. Body and language are codependents. In this paper, I draw on 2 short additional workshops in Clemson's architecture department subsequent to the original course. In the subsequent ones were 2014 and 2015, in which I used a somatic approach rather than a rhetorical one. In these workshops, I applied the creative process of renowned landscape architect Lawrence Halprin and his wife, Anna Halprin. His wife, Anna, is a dance pioneer, and their daughter, Daria Halprin, was a dancer turned psychologist. So very interdisciplinary, the landscape architect, the dancer, and the dancer turned psychologist. These workshops reflect the critical lens of soma aesthetics, a name coined by philosopher Richard Schusterman. As a theory applicable to architecture, it holds that our bodies provide the most basic tool for all spatial articulation by constituting the point from which space can be experienced and articulated. And there's another fly in here. Architectural design aims to enhance somatic experience. That's its purpose. Not to be read, but to enhance users' somatic experience. So this overlaps with other disciplines too. In engineering or physical sciences, concepts of inertia, force, gravity, magnetism, and friction are readily perceived as embodied. As neurophysiologists tell us, I think I've moved on to another one. Yeah. As neurophysiologists tell us, perception is not only cognitive, nor is it limited to what we take in through 5 senses. The bodily senses of proprioception, kinesthetic sense, vestibular sense, the tactile also affect perception. Proprioception, or the orientation of body parts to each other, is a good example. You can experience that by closing your eyes and see if you can find your nose with your finger. Try it. That's your sense of proprioception. So to understand that, you just need to do this. So developing awareness of this extra-linguistic, and that's Jagielski's term, this extra-linguistic quality seems like an important part of a design process when we see architecture as the design of atmosphere rather than as a text or a visual experience. Now you could say that your finger and your nose communicated if you really want to get everything down to communication, but it's really more accurate to say that they're one information system. And I think medical people and science people confirm that. So the connection between soma, meaning body, and architecture plays out in the parallel careers of Anna and Larry Halprin. When I came across their work after the original course had ended, I recognized a way of working that may have satisfied architecture faculty, although it may not have satisfied the English department. As a graduate student in landscape architecture, Larry Halprin at Harvard in the 1940s was influenced by the interdisciplinary work of Walter Gropius of the Bauhaus movement, and he understood the need to develop somatic awareness, for architects to develop somatic awareness. Anna, who had accompanied her husband to Boston, had been teaching dance in the Boston area and began offering classes, dance classes for architecture students in her rented studio. To explore commonalities between dance and architecture, especially regarding space, she told students to use whatever furniture was in the room to construct an environment and then move through it. She was translating for them what she understood about space. She wanted them to explore the felt sense of space. What does I'm quoting her, what does a curve feel like to experience in your body as opposed to an angle? And Larry later remembered working with space and form and interdisciplinary arts as key takeaways from his Harvard years. And those are all quotations that I took from Anna's biographer, Janice Ross. As the capstone project in my certification as a practitioner of the Halprin process through Tamalpa Institute in San Francisco, I revisited Clemson School of Architecture in 2014, this time under the mentorship of Daria Halprin. Mary Padua, then chair of landscape architecture at Clemson, had herself participated in the Halprin workshops. Professor Dan Ford offered his students, and this time my role was not as writing instructor, but as Tamalpa practitioner. Our approach was extra linguistic, with one inquiry question being, where do ideas come from? We used an undeveloped lot adjacent to the architecture complex for the 4 afternoon workshops. I've detailed that project in a separate paper, but I want to highlight here 2 examples showing the extra-linguistic nature of the workshops, from which then written and visual artifacts arose. In these activities, a key parameter was to maintain silence, so no communication, as well as inner awareness. And the students willingly played along with this. The first was a blindfolded group awareness walk led by Professor Padua. This is a signature Halprin exercise used by them in urban design commissions as well as student workshops. So without the sense of sight, students' overall awareness was heightened. And I have used this in just about all of my courses for various reasons. As long as I can find the intention that relates to whatever the course material is, and I usually can, something metaphorical, they buy it and they love it. They always say it's their favorite thing. Another was a group build on the lot. Students improvised with found materials, but without using verbal or gestural communication, although they did lapse into some conversation at the beginning of the activity when no clear leader emerged and they faltered about how to proceed. So I verbally reminded them of the parameters and said that someone should just make a move with a piece of material and then others respond to that. And as they riffed off of each other's design gestures, a kind of improvisational dance emerged. It was a moment of dropping in to the extra-linguistic extra. Their unfamiliarity and discomfort with an embodied way of working was evident at times, and this challenged me to be transparent about the intentions. They grew more accustomed to the Halprin methods as we progressed, in direct relationship to my and Dan Ford's and Mary Padua's openness. In the review that happened at the end of the 2 weeks, unlike a review from the first week, I noted that students linked their direct experience to their ideas. And when I returned later for the final review, for which Professor Ford had assigned a concept plan, a photo montage ideogram, so there's the visual, and a haiku narrative, which was the language, and he did this on his own accord without checking with me. Many of the students had woven their writing into their drawings and presentations. And I found this writing to be full of voice and unburdened by abstractions because it was grounded in immediate experience. A year later, in Professor Anne-Marie Jack's studio, who has taken many of these photographs, the nearby South Carolina Botanical Garden was the assigned site for the designs of a Japanese tea house. Jacks wanted to emphasize a qualitative approach alongside a quantitative one. We again used the Halperin's process-oriented scores. Scores are plans of action over time that tell what to do, but not how to do it. And Anna Halperin used the same in her dance work. So not choreography, but scoreography. So she never choreographed, she never set it down with her intention being the point. It was in the moment. And that was what was so radical and still is about her work. We wanted to keep the focus intentional, but not driven toward the production of text. So only after embodied experiences did students write or design. While these were not communication or writing-centric workshops, they mirror Robert Yagelski's vision for writing as a way of being. And I quote, "What if we understood writing as more than the production of text? What if we understood writing as praxis?" End quote. He calls for, quote, "a pedagogy that focuses on the writer writing rather than the writer's writing, because the text, no matter how important it might eventually become to the writer or to a reader, ultimately is separate from the experience of writing it," end quote. Current theory fails to explain this experience, he says. And another quote, "The text does not disappear in this pedagogy, but rather than being the focus of writing instruction, it becomes a component of the process of inquiry into self and world that the act of writing can be." As a theoretical lens, soma aesthetics can inform interdisciplinary situations as well as in architecture, where it is desirable to underscore the maker making as well as the maker's product. Although it's clear that the body works in reciprocity with the cognitive, at the most fundamental level, Western thought disdains the body because its functions are automatic. They operate behind the scenes of our conscious awareness. So we imagine body to be in service to mind. Our calling to reason and communicate, which makes the telling of our experiences more meaningful than the experience itself, is for Schusterman a one-sided vision of the humanities. He notes the connotations of body and service as belonging to those deemed inferior or second class, such as women or people of color. Pedagogy that acknowledges the give and take of soma and mind addresses this basic split in our collective consciousness. The next slide that I have is a writing excerpt by a student of Yagelski's from a writing class at an Ohio prison, Jimmy Baca, and it illustrates the overlap of body and cognition in an extralinguistic writing experience. Baca did not intend for this writing to be read, and to highlight the somatic aspects of his writing experience, I have highlighted language that denotes the intersection of soma and language. And here's an example of those with colors. And the other thing is color coded. You won't be able to remember that, but it's on that handout if you got it there. So we're looking for physical body parts that he notes, things that have to do with shape, size, bodily systems like blood flowing or breathing, synesthesia, axial and locomotor actions, spatial relationships to something else, over, under, around, beside, between, sense of time and rhythm, and qualities of energy and force. All of these things are known to dance students as the elements of movement. You can Google elements of movement and you get that stuff. It's language and body side by side. So here's Baca, and you can see how my highlighting goes. So I'm going to read this, but I'm going to emphasize the highlighted words more than his actual poetry. I was born a poet one noon, gazing at weeds and creosoted grass at the base of a telephone pole outside my grilled cell window. The words I wrote then sailed me out of myself, and I was transported and metamorphosed into the images they made. From the dirty brown blades of grass came bolts of electrical light, and that jolted loose my old self through the top of my head. That self was released and reshaped in the clump of scrawny grass. Through language, I became the grass, speaking its language and feeling its green feelings and black root sensations. Earth was my mother, and I bathed, I couldn't have a color for that, in sunshine. Minuscule size spectacles of sunlight I passed through my green skin and metabolized in my blood. So this is not body language in which the body is a metaphor for nonverbal communication. The term body language, again, casts body as a tool to something else. Baca's writing shows body and language in reciprocity in his experience. Reflecting on his experience, Jagielski says, and I quote, "Writing in his cell, he did not escape his physical surroundings so much as dissolve into them. He felt an intensified sense of himself being at that moment, a sense of being by which he embraced and transcended his surroundings. The writing was an embodied way of inhabiting the place," end quote. I have one more little haiku written by a student in Professor Ford's studio, Justin, which uses language of embodied experience to express his decision to approach the undeveloped lot from the slope, that's his word. And that word choice has more of an architectural connotation than hill. It was a slope, not a hill. And because they had approached it from another angle, and this time he had chosen to come from the slope. Waters sound, birds sing, it pulls me in, the slope winds, from above we watch. So dissolving into one's surroundings somatically does not diminish the need for students to communicate well through writing or through skillfully made blueprints and models or documents of any kind. It does position language and the kinesthetic experience side by side, not in opposition, but in relationship with each other. And it highlights the maker's sense of being. Larry Halperin's perspective reflects Jagielski's, and I quote Larry Halperin, "What we want, what we desperately need, is a feeling of closeness and creative involvement in processes. It's the doing that we all enjoy and which is meaningful to us. That is what is needed in education, in the ghetto, in the young and the downtrodden who feel that they are excluded from the process of decision-making in our communities." A soma aesthetic perspective allows us to address the qualitative experience of writing, designing, or being in a way that a purely rhetorical perspective does not. But unless the pedagogical intention, the intention is extra-linguistic, play and somatic experience come across as mechanical or kind of woo-woo, or just like we had tried out some activity from a book. In my first foray into writing in architecture before my Halperin experience, I could barely frame questions to bridge the gulf with architecture faculty, much less present such methods as these to students. A non-dualistic pedagogy was that foreign to me. Even in more recent teaching, I still need regular attention to a somatic practice of my own to remember the body, especially when the course is rhetorically focused. But I've found students to be willing players if the activities are intentional, if it's clear to them how they're intentional, not as steps to a goal, but as resources to draw on in a process. As products of an educational system that steeps them in writing to produce text, which can now even be aided by artificial intelligence. Students are as unaccustomed to extra-linguistic pedagogy as I was. Going forward, we need not ignore the reading of things as text, but when innovation is valued, communication is not all there is. And there's some sources which are also on the handout. Stop share, right? Okay. So shall we move on to Molly? Thank you. How'd I do time-wise? I forgot to check. Hopefully it was within 20 minutes. Okay. What do we need to do to get Molly on there?
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen okay? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I wanna thank my fellow panelists. It's a real pleasure to be on this panel with them. My name is Molly Ryan. My pronouns are she, her, and I currently teach both Introduction to College Composition and Writing from Research at Virginia Tech. My research broadly investigates critical pedagogy, the rhetorics of DEI in higher education, compassion-based teaching and contract grading, and as I am presenting on today, future forward genre work, in this case, the visual or graphic abstract. I want to offer a brief roadmap to this presentation. I'll begin by contextualizing the background and a short history of the genre, introduce relevant scholarship defining the genre heuristic, and explore the significant facets of this work within WAC contexts. I'll show some examples, I'll discuss my approach to teaching this genre, and then finally how I implemented this framework within my Writing from Research class. So I've chosen to begin this presentation by showing an example of the first visual abstract I've ever made. And if you all will bear with me, I'd like to open with a little story on how this genre found its way into my classroom. I was introduced to the concept of the visual abstract at a notable time in my graduate studies. I was a particularly eager, enthusiastic first-year master's student with a hunger to teach and teach well. And yet simultaneously, I was painfully aware of my own greenness, my almost dizzying lack of experience. It is difficult to be in a liminal position of wanting to do something well, feeling called to this intangible world you have not quite reached, and still realizing that, particularly as a graduate student, unknowns, missteps, and uncertainties are not just likely, but a guarantee. So as I navigated this speculative period of pre-teaching, knowing I would be responsible for my own courses in less than a year, my unsettled curiosities craved explorative genres that I could bring to my classroom. I felt in some ways it was my responsibility as a rising teacher to support fresh genre work in the context of first-year writing. I realize that this may seem counterintuitive, but in my mind, newness naturally sponsored newness. With consultation from one of my close mentors, Dr. Derek Mueller, I began to explore other ways to bring multimodality into my classroom for my students in a way that preferably sponsored WAC ideals. Enter the visual abstract. What I found was a genre that was still relatively new in formation, still quite flexible, but felt immensely significant, not only in its potential for the field of technical communication and writing studies, but in its long-lasting implications for students. In short, I could see how the trajectory of this genre was just beginning in its rapid growth for all fields. And it was a genre that was beautiful. I found myself struck by how easy it was for me to understand complex work far beyond the realm of my field. Not only did I want to understand how to implement this work myself, but I saw myself as somewhat accountable, particularly as a first-year writing instructor at an R1 university with prolific STEM programming, with an audience of students, primarily in colleges beyond my own, for introducing my students to this method of research dissemination. In my mind, it was not a matter of if they would encounter this genre in their variety of futures, but when. Formulating how I wanted to introduce this genre, and moreover how to teach it, particularly in the context of first-year writing, was more complex than I anticipated, however. Although the identifying characteristics of the genre are relatively discoverable, there is arguably only a very tentative canon or praxis of visual abstracts. There exists a combination of examples and recommendations, but what was rather obviously missing from scholarship was the how to teach this genre, how to do this genre, and most pressingly, how to bridge the gap between this genre and the traditional abstract for students. Thus, I sought to discover how to do exactly that. To begin, I've offered the following abridged definition as an introduction to the key scholarship. A visual abstract, sometimes called a graphic abstract, is a genre of research summary relying primarily on visual elements to summarize a research project. The visual abstract contains only essential text in plain language, free from jargon, so that a general audience can easily understand the key information provided. The basis of my heuristic lies in medical research dissemination, which makes this genre particularly pertinent and relevant to medical rhetoricians, as well as instructors of first-year writing and technical communication. I've chosen to highlight a selection of foundational articles across 4 years, from 2017 to 2020, to establish a brief literature review to inform my suggested implementation in the field of rhetoric and composition. Much of the current literature on visual abstracts falls into two categories: statistical analyses of the modality of dissemination and characteristics to define the genre itself. Beginning in 2017, Napoleon Ibrahim offered a formative gloss of the formation and nature of the visual abstract within the field of digital research, including 6 characteristics in an observed sample of the genre, a template and example figures, and 5 design considerations. Also in 2017, Ibrahim et al. Established that visual abstracts on Twitter resulted in more than double clicks and visits to the actual article itself compared to traditional textual counterparts. Lindquist and Ramirez-Zofield in 2019 recorded in their study that visual abstracts received over 5 times the impressions on Twitter compared to textual abstracts, approximately 170,000 compared to 25,000 to be specific. Oska et al. In 2020 established that visual abstracts resulted in 5 times the engagement of textual abstracts and 3.5 times the engagement of key figures abstracts. As Ramos and Concepcion noted in their 2020 study, the use of digital abstracts will continue to grow, and those in the scientific community would benefit from harnessing this tool, whether as creators or consumers. I've chosen to share Napoleon and Ibrahim's 6 characteristics because they provide a very generative and accessible framework for the genre, and this particular scaffolding translates well to the field of rhetoric and composition. These 6 characteristics are: the visual abstract must show the key question, the visual abstract must include an outcome summary or main findings, the visual abstract must have clear identifying information, the visual abstract must identify the group studied, the visual abstract must include a graphic element for each outcome, and when possible, these outcomes should be supported by key numbers or figures for quantitative studies specifically. I also wanted to present as a further scaffolding opportunity Napoleon and Ibrahim's design considerations for similarly applicable disciplinary transfer. First, the visual abstract should focus on user experience, particularly in accessibility for a broad audience. The visual abstract should have clear purpose, as in identity, expression, and simplicity of research summary. The visual abstract should fall into the design thinking principle of rapid prototyping. In other words, it should be easily draftable and designable. The visual abstract should be capable of iterative improvement through peer review, collaboration, or other opportune communication. And finally, the visual abstract should show thoughtful restraint and illustrate the key points and only the key points. Beyond Napoleon and Ibrahim's framework, the CDC also provides a template, as well as a suggested best practices list for authors. This list and template, both of which read more similarly to a replicable method, assisted in my design of my own assignment of a visual abstract for first-year students. The CDC recommends including keywords, as well as carefully chosen text, not to exceed 85 characters per panel. So in terms of broad considerations for WAC programming and framing based on these established frameworks, some implications of this genre include: first, a broader audience reach. As provided by established studies, incorporating visual abstracts into the curriculum of the writing classroom automatically engages with a scholarly conversation far larger than the centric realm of composition studies. Second, the genre provides a bridge to make research accessible across multiple levels of scholarship, including a general audience, which for students, particularly as they cross the threshold from prior education into more serious research, is arguably essential. Further, designing visual abstracts, even in their simplest form, speaks directly to concepts of writing transfer. The rapid evolution of this genre within multiple fields means that, as I mentioned before, it is not a matter of if students will see this genre, but when. Just recently at my university, our annual university-wide research symposium, which includes senior undergraduates of all disciplines, strongly recommended submission of a graphic abstract to help participants and audience members quickly understand the presented research. However, the call for papers included no further specifications or information, no formatting suggestions, and no examples. I was surprised at the expectation for students to inherently know this genre and to be prepared to submit it to a large-scale conference without any parameters given. With the additional ties to multimodality, digital and visual rhetoric, and STEM fields, this genre is a natural ambassador to writing across the curriculum for both students and instructors, and opens avenues for multidisciplinary genre literacy. Finally, this genre is ample an opportunity for bringing and teaching personal expression and identity within the research writing genre. According to evidence from my classes, and along with the supporting scholarship, I've seen firsthand how this genre helps students feel more personally invested, represented, and inspired in their research. Based on the genre implications and established literature, in order to effectively teach this practice to students, I developed the following characteristics as a lightly forged and flexible disciplinary adjusted criteria. First, I incorporated the use of key identifiers. This is especially important for new and upcoming researchers who might potentially design a viral abstract. Further, I established that the abstract should identify a summarized purpose or inquiry, as well as an applicable method or methodology as appropriate. Finally, similarly to Nicolaian and Ibrahim, I articulate consideration of graphic elements for each phase, as well as consideration of visual rhetoric, including design, typography, use of color, etc. So this example is one I created for another research project a couple of years ago, or a year ago now, following the 3-panel format, low word count, and highlighting a visual abstract or aspects. This particular example I created on Canva, and it took me less than an hour to make this. This example is more involved with a bolder design to show how the 3-panel format can be expanded upon according to creator desire, as well as how the genre can reflect aesthetic and identity of the author. So moving into teaching now. In the English 1106 Writing from Research curriculum, a multimodal transformation of students' sustained research project is included as the final piece of a semester's work. Typically, this transformation is also recommended for what our curriculum calls the hokey pitch, or a brief public presentation of the student's research to the class in the last few weeks of the semester. I introduced the concept of the visual abstract once prior to the multimodal unit when I covered the concept of abstracts broadly. As we moved into the multimodal unit, I presented my students with a variety of options to consider for how to present their research in a digital form. After all, I've been careful in the course thus far to articulate that the future belonged to them and their vision for their research. Their research was exclusively theirs, a facet they added to a larger conversation within each of their respective fields. The multimodal project I affirmed for them was no different. My students were thrilled with the freedom of choice I gave them as they crafted their research. With my guidance, they had permission to explore any field or question of their choosing. All I asked was that they pursued a genuine interest or inquiry with attention to their personal curiosities. This only increased the pressure I was feeling when we reached the multimodal unit. My students had been generous and leapt into their projects with such heart and passion. I wanted the multimodal element to enhance their experiences further, rather than detract from their investment in their work. To frame the assignment itself, I used the following strategies. I decided that rather than mandating students take on a visual abstract, I would present it as an option they could choose amidst a variety of possibilities, including the conference poster, a visual essay, a social media post, or a website. I made it clear that the students were free to select the option they felt best suited their field, their research, and their intentions with this project. I took care and time, as I did with all the multimodal options, to give students ample examples and explain characteristics of the genre, as well as how the genre is evolving in multidisciplinary contexts. I explained why visual abstracts are becoming a frequent topic of conversation in the multimodal research world, and how it was very possible that many of them, particularly those on research-geared tracks of study, would encounter this genre in the future. We played with a variety of types of abstracts, including those published in established work, descriptive abstracts, and summarizing abstracts. I asked them to consider how they preferred to interact with research. What stood out to them? When I presented the multimodal assignment itself, I built 2 days into my course calendar as a workshop for them to explore digital platforms for their research with my assistance. I presented the assignment sheet, showed them the examples I created myself, and reminded them that they did not have to select the abstract option. They were free to use the time to explore all the genre options should they wish to. When my students began their work time, I moved around the room to check in with each of them individually to offer support, suggestions, and in-the-moment feedback. Because of the sometimes uneven locus of first-year writing, I built my students 2 usable templates, one in Google Slides and one in Canva, with suggested parameters, as well as a simple set of criteria to aspire to as they built their projects. This is certainly not to say that I think students are incapable of building this modality from the ground up. Rather, because I knew that this assignment felt new and different, I wanted to supply usable resources to support their exploration, rather than demanding they venture into the world of visual research with no starting point. And I hope to indicate to my students that I did not want them to pay for any additional software to create this modality, nor would it take learning a totally unfamiliar platform for them to engage meaningfully with the genre. Further, I asked my students to think about the following limitations in their creations, the same limitations I use myself. The abstract should be approximately the size of one standard presentation slide. The title should be the largest text element, clearly visible for the audience. The graphic element should be highlighted rather than the text itself. I gave them the option to, as an additional credit assignment, which is an important note, I use contract rating in my class, to create a visual abstract as a multimodal proposal for their research, either for their current project or another, in case they were uncomfortable with using the genre for their sustained research project as a whole. So as a whole, I believe this genre to be a generative approach to a WAC-oriented classroom, applicable without overcomplicating existing multimodal structures within the context of composition. In the spirit of reinvention, of rewriting the past in the face of a troubling future, the visual abstract, in contrast to its traditional counterpart, represents a braided dialogue of visual rhetoric, storyboarding, research narrative, and individual pathos. If a speculative future of research is to be imagined with pronoic possibilities of breaking binaries, crossing boundaries, and cultivating hope, the visual abstract is undoubtedly an important piece of that puzzle. And here I've provided a QR code for my assignment design that's on Google Docs if anyone's curious. And if anyone would like to see the assignment in another context, you're welcome to email me. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Molly. And we'll move on to Christy now, Christy Crawley.
Thank you. These have been wonderful presentations. Can all of you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Christy Crawley, and I am an English instructor at Forsyth Technical Community College. And today I'm going to present Moonshot Writing, Cancer Prevention, Online Discourse Communities, and WAC Pedagogy. First, I would like to discuss the exigence surrounding this project. In 2022, President Biden reignited the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, setting the ambitious goal of reducing the death rate from cancer by 50% over the next 25 years and improving cancer patients' experiences. Although Biden's initiative focuses on supporting patients and caregivers, funding research, and closing the screening gap, one of the most important goals is understanding and addressing environmental exposure to cancer-causing substances. While detection and treatment are important, prevention is imperative. Shockingly, up to 10% of cancers are inherited, which links 90% of cancer cases to environmental causes. Despite this statistic, media, fundraising, and research focus primarily on detection and treatment. The urgent need to attend to the environmental causes of cancer produces an opportunity for WAC students to participate in the Cancer Moonshot Initiative. In the following slides, I will share with you my experience of including environmental discourse communities in my writing and research in the discipline's classroom. To acquaint students with the concept of environmental discourse communities, we discuss the following characteristics in relation to existing discourse communities. As a brief illustration, students view the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners website. So on the screen, I have just general characteristics that apply to any discourse community. And so just going through these, I will just briefly connect these to what students typically see on a site, giving them just an idea of what exactly is a discourse community. So in looking at the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners website, the goal of agreed upon set of common goals. On the website, students will take a look and they will see, of course, that the mission statement includes the work that they're doing, specifically identified as will help you identify some known and suspected breast cancer risk factors and give you tips on how you can make simple changes to reduce your risk. They strive to accomplish this broad goal through individual campaigns in their Take Action section. For example, there's so many campaigns on these websites, but one particular example, just for the sake of time, it says Burger King will use PFAS-free packaging in 2025. So you'll see similar goals targeted towards specific companies and products so that they can address the chemicals that are being used that are linked to breast cancer. The second part that we see here, the second characteristic, participatory mechanisms, primarily to provide information and feedback. So within this website, we have a link called Coalition Partners. This section notes that they seek partners for idea generation, meaning the upcoming campaigns that they're going to create in order to reduce the number of cancer-causing chemicals within the products of our society. And so this involves some collaborative campaigning and effective advocacy. So users sign up to become members and add their voices to the conversation in an online forum. They also host in-person and virtual meetings. So those are the mechanisms they use for their communication and feedback as they're generating these calls for action. Next, we have acquiring a specific lexis. As you can imagine with cancer research, there are so many complicated terms. And so we need a glossary. And so they provide this on the website, the glossary of breast cancer exposures. They define specialized terms, identify products containing specific cancer-causing chemicals. They note the connection between cancer and the chemical, and then they provide tips for limiting exposure. The final characteristic, the idea of having relevant content and discoursal expertise. This group actually exhibits that as they share their qualifications, as we have a scientific advisory panel. As you can imagine, if you looked at that panel, you could definitely see such credentials as, an oncologist, an MD, a chemist, people from all walks of scientific and health communities. Also advisory panel members, as well as just members from the community that are cancer survivors, or maybe they have been caregivers and they have a genuine interest in these topics. So throughout the website, you'll see documents where there are journal articles published from the actual members, or there are, narratives and suggestions and all types of writing that you'll see within this community. So now in connecting this to the WAC classroom, we see that environmental discourse communities, students serve as agents of change in these communities. And so I just want to quickly go step by step through the process of forming these communities and see what they can do in the classroom for students. The first point that I want to mention here, students form groups based on a specific cancer type. Many select a type based on their personal experience or a loved one's experience with cancer. Their personal experience enhances their interest in the topic and project. So this really provides a buy-in so that they have a personal connection to this project right away and a dedication to it and finding out more and wanting to help the environment. So after they select a specific type of cancer, the next step is, of course, reviewing existing environmental groups' campaigns. And so with these campaigns, oftentimes these are goals set. And I'll have on the next slide an example to show you. When they're setting goals, oftentimes they'll look at campaigns. Of course, this is not a requirement. Sometimes I'll have groups of students that actually select a type of cancer where maybe there's not an existing environmental group online with campaigns. So in that case, they may find a chemical related to that particular cancer, and they will start researching and seeing the connections. And you can always find products with that chemical. And so every product that we have, there's always packaging where there's contact information and ways to express your views to that particular company using that cancer causing chemical. And so in looking at the campaigns for groups of students, especially with common cancers like lung cancer, breast cancer, those types, you can usually find those environmental groups online. And this particular campaign is just one example of many from the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. And as we look at this, students will select a campaign posted on an environmental discourse community's website, or select a cancer-causing chemical associated with a specific product. The campaigns assist the group in generating a goal and providing an authentic audience. So right away from this campaign, you can see it says Tell Congress. So right away they have an audience that's authentic. They're not just writing for their classmates or for their instructor. And then of course, this is just a quick blurb, but if we were able to click on this Take Action, you would see more details about this campaign. But essentially it says, support the Safer Beauty Bill package to ban the worst chemicals. So within this description, if we clicked on this, it would obviously spell out the chemicals they're referring to, and require ingredient transparency and protect women of color and salon workers. And so with this, they have an overall mission and goal. So as they are trying to collect points to support their position, they will go forward and looking more into the specifics of this beauty bill package and what it entails. And then of course, they'll have to develop their vocabulary along the way before they start actually putting together this in a type of project. So within their discourse communities, as I said, they have to develop a glossary. Sometimes an annotated bibliography would be a useful tool as well. But in developing the glossary, they think about the words that are prevalent within the publications they're seeing, and becoming familiar as a group with the terminology that they need to use within their argument. And so prior to deciding the form their project should take, students engage in research across disciplines to further develop an understanding of specialized terms and expand their knowledge as content experts. In the previous example related to the Safer Beauty Bill package, students located academic and popular text across disciplines to support their position. Some students located sources in business publications concerning pink washing, meaning when a company uses the pink ribbon symbol for marketing purposes without meaningfully supporting breast cancer awareness. Others unearthed science and health articles noting the results of scientific studies linking specific chemicals to cosmetics and cancer. And some students discovered sources focused on social injustices, noting that women of color suffer from a higher level of exposure to hazardous chemicals in beauty products aggressively marketed to them. When locating sources for their glossary and gathering support for their position, students share their research findings, posed questions when they encountered difficulties in finding sources, and provided suggestions to their peers in discussion board forums. So this is something that can be easily, in terms of the group's communication, you can start in your, Blackboard, Canvas course, or, Microsoft Teams, whatever line of communication you prefer your students to use. And so when we think about what we do with all this information, so after the students form their glossary and become familiar with terminology and give feedback to each other on the direction they should go in, then of course, they have several options in terms of potential products that they can create. And so in these multimodal products, you can see that they can actually choose for many. So out of the discourse communities, various projects emerge as a vehicle for conveying their argument. As noted here, websites, reports, podcasts, digital scrapbooks, and so many others take form for their projects. Students share their findings with the class and have the option of submitting all or part of their text to the intended audience listed in the campaign or to a specific company that uses cancer-causing chemicals in their products. Through students' participation in discourse communities, they serve as agents of change via their participation in environmental discourse communities targeting cancer prevention. As noted earlier, the campaigns posted on environmental websites update viewers on campaign victories, such as companies changing ingredients or adding product warnings. Thus, students play an active role in our country's Moonshot Cancer Initiative. So they are able to see real results from the work that they do. So it's not just something they turn in for a grade and then move forward. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes we will see results. And so those environmental groups are great about posting those victories and talking about the changes that the company's making and the difference that the writers have actually made in this process. And so there are many critics within the community that criticize environmental groups such as this, calling them fear mongers, because a lot of times it's hard due to socioeconomic reasons to actually rid your household of all these products that contain cancer-causing ingredients. But at the same time, I tell students that this is one step at a time. Just like when you think about the environmental initiatives that have happened over our lifetime, such as a lot of places just doing something as simple as going from a plastic straw to a paper straw. So all of this is just step by step. So hoping to phase out things gradually. Obviously, there's not any drastic changes that are going to take place immediately, but it's about making those steps toward having cancer-free, products surrounding us. Hopefully, gradually, one product at a time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. Can they hear me now? Thank you, Christy and Molly. Wonderful presentations, and we have about 10 minutes for some conversation. And she, can they hear?
Thank you. Christy, I was really inspired by your presentation. And as a great advocate of engaged learning and client-based projects, I wonder how your students feel about these projects. Do they feel empowerment, or do they feel that you're throwing them into deep water and maybe get a little concerned about the depth of this project? And also, do you follow up or do they get some feedback? Has it happened in the past that they received feedback from maybe a targeted group if they sent a letter, or are those letters only reaching you and they're not going all the way to the targeted audience group? I wonder about these implications of the approach that you're taking.
Thank you. It's actually a mixed bag. Some students do become overwhelmed, especially when they delve into some of the scientific research. A lot of science reports and journals can be quite challenging in terms of the reading, but I think the glossary does help, as you know, they want to know which chemicals are necessarily in these products, and just establishing that there actually is proof through studies that, you know, we're linking this particular chemical to a specific product. And so gathering that evidence. So I try to make sure they're not getting weighted down and trying to understand every single word of, you know, a science journal article. So that's the challenging part. Other students particularly love it and seeing it as meaningful work, because that cancer has touched their lives in some way or another. And that's why I really like this project, because really sadly, cancer has almost touched almost all students' lives. It's rare that I have a student that has not been through some type of experience where a loved one, or actually themselves, have been affected by cancer. In terms of the results, when we think about companies responding back to them, if you actually click that action button that I had up just a second ago, it did, all of the writings are funneled through the Breast Cancer Partners website, if you go through their website. And so they actually respond to the organization as a whole, if that makes sense. Whereas other groups have decided to do it on an individual basis, where they don't go through a group like Cancer Prevention Partners. Instead, they actually decide to contact the company directly. So if we were talking about deodorants, for example, and we were contacting, you know, that particular group that produced the deodorant, sometimes they will receive very brief emails. Some of them are more or less rote emails saying, you know, thank you for your interest in our product, and you know, we're looking into that. So some of them aren't very promising, but I think that the campaigns with the organizations are stronger actually than just the individual reaching out to a company, because you're bombarding them with so many different voices through the coalition of those environmental organizations.
I regret that you can't see me. I was nodding vigorously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a very inspiring work, and I hope lots of other schools and writing projects will adapt a similar approach. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Hi, this is a question for Molly. First of all, thanks for your presentation, which I'm feeling very inspired now to incorporate something with visual abstracts. So thanks so much for sharing your assignment sheet. I'm wondering how, as somebody who's developed some expertise around this, how you think or how you explain to students the relationship between visual abstracts and the more familiar, maybe visual genre of posters. Because there seems like there's a lot of overlap, but they clearly are not the same thing.
Yeah, I love that question. One of the first times I presented on this work, someone asked me about that exact thing, like, what did I see the rhetorical relationship between the conference poster and the visual abstract being? So for my students, what I do, of course, keep in mind here, I'm teaching first year writing, so very new, most of them in their research journeys. Not all of them, but a lot of them, have never even seen a conference poster before. So we actually start in my class looking at conference posters. We discuss them, we talk about their affordances, and we talk about some of their limitations. And then I tend to move into the visual abstract just because it is much more succinct. And it's a much more kind of like a bite-sized version of research, whereas in a poster, at least maybe you could say an ideal poster or a poster that's doing what it should do, you're getting at least a gloss of an entire picture of research. A visual abstract is really not designed so much to do that. It really tends more towards the descriptive abstract in that it's giving you a snapshot and encouraging you to go to the actual article itself. So for me, I think that they both have kind of their own independent realms. They both exist, they're both relevant, and they both will probably still continue to be relevant for some time, at least in my imagining. However, I do think as we move more into digital programming and we move more into digital poster sessions and we move more into rapid bite-sized research style pitches and things like that, the visual abstract is a way to shrink your poster down into, again, a much more palatable or small scale project. So another way I introduced it to my students too is essentially like your visual abstract is the abstract for your poster. It could go on your poster, you could include it with your poster, or it could be like a handout that you provide with your poster, something like that, because they're interrelated, but they are kind of doing different things. And I found that even, again, my students who are pretty new, at least at that scale of research, were able to say like, okay, yes, this makes sense. Like the research poster is the full novel and the visual abstract is kind of the synopsis, if that makes sense. So, but I love that question. It's one I'm still wrestling with myself, frankly, posters versus visual abstracts.
Thanks.
3 more minutes.
My question's for Jenny. We'll just round out the panel. You mentioned the somatic exercises like no words, no gestures, and that you have found sometimes metaphorical reasons to include them in courses where they might not automatically, be obvious why they would be there. And I was just curious to hear more about that. Like, are there some bizarre scenarios where students find themselves walking blindfolded down the street?
I don't usually use the blindfolded one, but I do have in composition, we have at Clemson, the first assignment is a landmark analysis of Clemson because we're doing our history of Clemson, being a plantation and all. And so this is, especially if they're freshmen, it's their first, they don't know the campus that well. So they go individually. I tell them to shut off the phone. I won't know if they do or not. They're not blindfolded, but I tell them the parameters are take a walk, stop 3 times. You can choose where you want to stop as you go, or you can plan it ahead. And when you take your journal, not your computer, and when you pause at a place, observe what's going on with yourself physically. That could be anything like it's hot, which it is in August, or cold, which it is in January, or it could be, or your mood, or any associations and memories that you have. A lot of students come here, live in South Carolina. They've been here to football games. So they just, and then the fourth one is then tell about the walk itself. How did you decide where you were going to go and that kind of thing. And they write 250 words for each of those 4 questions and put it in Canvas. And if they did that, I give them credit. And it's a high stakes assignment because it's, it gets them out onto campus and it makes campus real to them. And then they find what they, and then all the other landmark analysis assignments come from that. Then there was a course I taught, a humanities course called The Role of Dance in Culture, which translates to really the role of body in culture. If it's a Western culture, you know, we've got this body-mind split. Other cultures, the body's more, yeah, and dance are more enmeshed. And so we did the walk with that in mind as a way of understanding what the body's, how the body comes into it. And we talked about it in that sense. So it's just if I want to come at things from an embodied physical perspective, it's just a nice way to start. And, you know, we even do a meditation in that course about the body and they love it because they're stressed. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Molly and Christy. It was great to be with you. And thank you. Say again. Apana. Thank you very much. And thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you.